So welcome everyone to this session. Thank you so much for joining us uh, on this session about defending territories of life, experiences and strategies of young frontline defenders. We're very much looking forward to this session, which will be a very good opportunity for us to hear the stories from young custodians of territories of life and their experiences in defending their lands. We're also really looking forward to having a space for intergenerational learning and having conversations between young defenders, their elders, and their supporters. It's a session where all of us here will definitely have a lot of wisdom to take home, and we're really excited that you're all joining us today. So this session is being organized by the Icca Consortium, which is an international association dedicated to promoting and supporting indigenous peoples and local communities and their territories of life. My name is Sefa, and I'm from the Igorot people of the Cordillera, Philippines. I'm an honorary member of the Icca Consortium and co-chairing the consortium's youth group, Youth for Territories of Life. I'll be co-moderating this session together with Eleonora. So Eleonora, maybe you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you, Sefa, for this introduction, and welcome everyone to this interesting session on defending territory of life. My name is Eleonora, and I'm also an honorary member of the Icca Consortium and part of the Youth Consortium group. I come from a small island called Sardinia that belongs to Italy, and I'm currently speaking from Spain, where I'm working here at the University of Barcelona and working on issues related to conservation and conflicts. So yes, this is all. So I'll give back the words to Sefa and we start this session.
Yes. So we're going to be starting this session with a really cool video that that exudes a lot of energy from the youth. We're going to be starting with a rap video from Gazelle, who is an indigenous youth from the Yine people of Peru. So let me ask some help from Mariana. Okay.
Madre Tierra, te pedimos con respeto perdón por nuestros errores, por contaminar tus ríos y envenenar tus océanos, por no escuchar tus sollozos.
Desde la Amazonía profunda, el grito de la juventud, por nuestra vida, por nuestro planeta.
La tierra tiene fiebre, las aguas que se pierden, los bosques lloran sangre sin que nada los detenga. Se va perdiendo esa hermosa luz que tiene la selva. No tenemos dos planetas que tengan compasión. Si no ponemos un alto habrá mucha muerte y destrucción. Y no sé qué pasa con la población. No reaccionan habiendo un gran régimen de contaminación. La juventud está hundida en los vicios, esa sed viciosa que los deja en el prejuicio. Igual que la política es el peor oficio, porque no dejarían sin nada por su propio beneficio. Ok, un gran error que tiene esta población son las drogas, delincuencia y también la corrupción. Comunidades indígenas cambian su ubicación, lenguas desaparecidas, otras en extinción por la avaricia, la venganza y también la ambición. Son muchos problemas que yo veo en la televisión. La misión por el petróleo y la minería ilegal, que para los ríos y los peces es un veneno mortal. Pero así es la vida, como una moneda de doble cara. Aunque no jales del gatillo, el arma sola se dispara. No te preocupes por cosas que no te incumben. Preocúpate por la luz del día que te alumbre. Sigue contaminando mientras no pasa nada. Desastres en el mar y la tierra no tira lava. Pulmones del planeta, bosques sin escopetas, absorben lo oscuro y te dan el aire puro. El bosque es nuestra casa, farmacia sin receta, flora y fauna en abundancia, que aquí sí se respeta. Y verás que la madre naturaleza siempre está presente. Ok. La humanidad y la Amazonía juntos por la vida. Te lo digo yo, el veedor forestal de la Amazonía. Esto va empeorando pero no pierdo la fe, joven o adulto que me escucha. Algo te diré, echaré agua a la rosa y no la pise con los pies. Porque flor que se marchita, flor que no vive otra vez. Tratemos de cambiar por la humanidad, la crisis ecológica que de nosotros emana, que pone en peligro la existencia de la especie humana. Junto a los veedores aún hay esperanzas, aire, tierra y agua, formando más alianzas. La cultura, nuestras lenguas y también las tradiciones, que nos llena de orgullo todas nuestras regiones. Que sin bosques no hay vida, la gente no respira, ni fauna que camina por lo que tú contaminas. Y junto a la necio prospero, y con todas nuestras lenguas salvemos al mundo entero. Ok, no es que yo sea un orador, pero te digo con sudor. Soy tu veedor que mira la vida con mucho estupor. Desde Atalaya, Perú, para mis hermanos veedores como yo. Vamos a Ecuador, Colombia y Brasil, Guyana y Surinam, que ya somos más. Ecored, Amazonia 2.0, haciendo música que motiva, es la única alternativa.
De corazón para el mundo, desde Perú, Gacel, juntos somos uno. Bienvenidos a la Cumbre Mundial de Juventudes.
Okay, thank you for this video. So we start this session with this really energetic rap song from Gazelle from the Peruvian Amazon that with power and energy really stress the different issues that we all need to fight together to ensure that our Mother Earth won't be destroyed and to protect our territories of life. So we start this section with speaking about struggle. I'm very happy to present our first youth speaker, who is in the forefront of the struggle for the recognition of the indigenous community rights. From Peru, we go to Africa, and our first speaker comes from Kenya. Her name is Milka Chepkorir. Welcome, Milka. Yes, Milka is a member of the Sengwer indigenous people of Jerangui Hills in Kenya. And for the last 60 years, she has been working for the recognition of her community land rights. Currently, Milka coordinates the Community Land Action Now, which is a network of Kenyan rural communities striving to register their community lands. Just last year, she has also been an environmental justice fellow at Natural Justice in Kenya. Milka has also a particular interest in gender, and in her work with the community, and especially with the women of her community, she has been struggling to incorporate gender issue in the land rights struggle. She has been training in anthropology, and she is currently pursuing a master's degree in gender and development study. Milka has been really speaking loudly to advocate for her community rights, and she has already presented their issues before several UN processes. And in 2016, she has also been an Indigenous Fellow at the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. And Milka is now currently the coordinator of the Icca Consortium group on defending territories of life. So Milka, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome, and good evening from this end. My name is Milka, as you've heard, and so this evening I'm going to speak to you about how it has been to fight for the rights of our land as Indigenous community. And maybe give you just a perspective of the old and the young human rights defenders from our community in terms of, in our daily activities in defending our communal territorial rights. So Kenya is one of these countries with a very good constitution and very well written law on recognition of, respect to Indigenous and local communities' rights to land. But the implementation of such is way disconnected from what is written on paper, because the minds of the government officers and even the people themselves who are not ourselves as Indigenous communities are still so much colonized and still think of this fortress conservation. So I come from a forest indigenous community. So you can imagine, we live in the forest. And what fortress conservation does, what was left by the British colonial government was, conservation without people in these territories. But fortunate, and as they say, at the same time, unfortunate for us is that during the gazettement of this forest and the creation of these forest reserves, we were gazetted and put inside these forests with the trees. So our community and the trees and the forest is one. And that, of course, now had to lead to the forced evictions in the name of conservation. What has been happening not only to our communities, but to other communities in different parts of this world. So when that happened, the community during the colonial time was, disintegrated to different administrative locations, but still we remained within Cherangani Hills, where our ancestral land is. But again, during that time, there was forced assimilation. Now we had to be minorities in whichever administrative position, locations we were in. And, we kind of lost our culture and language during that process, but not completely, because we're still intact as a community in at least 2 forests now, in Kabulet Forest and in Embobot Forest in Kenya. So the fight for the communal land rights recognition has mainly been with the elderly. And they are the strongest, I would say, the strongest defenders of our territories in the community. The same is with most of the other indigenous communities in the country, because conservation is so much not what people do, but really how people live, so that indigenous communities are not conserving, but their way of life conserves. And that way of life, which is richly entrenched in the indigenous knowledge, is mostly with the elderly as opposed to the youth. Unfortunately, this drift between the elderly and the youth is increasing day by day, because the youth are getting to go to schools, going for employment opportunities in cities, and kind of detached from their territories and their languages and their culture. And, of course, the modern education system kind of wants to make indigenous communities look at their own way of life as a barbaric way of life and a way that is not socially accepted. So many youth haven't really picked up the role of protecting the territories because of those things: the forced assimilation, the education, and being taken away from the community for employment or wanting to look stylish and modern. That is what the modern, politics, economics, and social life is teaching indigenous people. But we have very strong defenders of these territories that are elderly, and the challenges for them is something that is out of this world sometimes, because some of them are sometimes arrested. There's one elder who is the leader of the Council of Elders of the community in Embobot that has been shot at by the Kenya Forest Service a number of times for speaking against the forceful evictions and the human rights violations happening in Embobot Forest. Of course, I would not say that we completely do not have youths, because I am there myself as a young person, and a couple of others who joined this, especially after I joined the Defending Territories movements in 2015. There've been a couple of other youths coming on board, but the interest is still not that much, because, of course, again, people are being pushed away to schools or to look for employment, like I said before. So the elderly have been left to, to take a huge chunk of this role. And the major challenges that come with that is, of course, the fact that they do not have the strength that the youth could have in terms of, getting up and doing some work and going to a government office to say this and that. That doesn't happen very fast because of their old age. The advantage, though, something that we like about them is the fact that even though they are not really that fast outgoing, is that whenever they go out to meet a government official or to meet officers from any conservation agency wanting to support the government, they are heard more than us young people because of that respect that generally the Kenyan culture, the African culture gives to the elderly. And that is a challenge for the youth, because when it is a time for the youth to present these kind of issues on protecting our territories, then we are taken for a joke. They're like, but you guys don't even look indigenous, you guys cannot even speak your language, you guys live in cities, how will you protect these territories? We are easily dismissed. And I have been dismissed a couple of times, and it got me really annoyed at some point when I was really making something, some very logical reason and legally reasonable point. But, I was just dismissed because I am young, I am a lady, and that specific government officer that's dismissed me looked at me and told me that I don't look indigenous. That was really annoying. And I went back to him later to ask him if indigenous people have to have something written on their forehead, or do we have to walk naked to be known to be indigenous, or what exactly does it mean to be indigenous? And because it was a forum where we were talking about gender issues in forest conservation among indigenous communities, it just took me to my toes to want to know what I can do so that I am accepted or I can be heard, even if I am young, because I cannot grow old overnight for me to get the respect. And that's why I went back to school to do the master's in gender and development studies. But now I had to focus on conservation, environmental conservation, and gender specifically, so that I can give my voice in a more acceptable way. And it's unfortunate that I had to do that, and I wasn't just accepted at the point when I was making that submission, without looking at whether I look indigenous or I have the professional capacity or skills to make such a submission. I would want to imagine that is a challenge that many youths go through, whenever they want to stand for their territories of life. And if that is what happens, then it pushes many of the youths to take other ways of lobbying, could be through demonstration or through other things, to be heard, which is unfortunate, because I would expect that the respect of being indigenous should have been just there in the first place, just like it is articulated in laws and even in many of the UN treaties, and given that as such, rather than pushing the youth to a very far age where they need to prove themselves so much to be accepted, to be able, to be accepted or just seen as people who are able to do this protection of their own territories. A challenge that is faced by the elderly currently is especially during the evictions in Embobut, is the loss of their lives. And that means that we are losing our culture, we are losing our heritage with the loss of the elderly due to the exposure to cold and lack of food and trauma that comes with forced evictions. And even seeing their children and grandchildren suffering in the hands of government officers who want to take us out of our territories in the name of conservation. Since 2015, we have lost a couple of the elderlies, even those who have been speaking against the forceful evictions. One of them was arrested in 2015, taken to a police cell. I think he spent like 3 days and taken to court, but he was acquitted and he died sometimes later. We have lost a number of them, and the ones remaining now are kind of now, worn out, but we are just hoping that they can stay with us for some time so that the youth, especially during this COVID season, can learn from them. So to address all these issues that I have spoken about, the challenges of the youth and the elderly, what we are doing as a community here in Kenya, in Cherangani Hills, is to start an Indigenous-led education, specifically to pass this knowledge from the elderly to the youth, just so that we can pick up this battle from the youth, from the elderly to the youth, and keep it going until when we have our land rights recognized and we have our territories really recognized and respected by the government and by majority communities around us. I think that is what I would say for now. I have seen other youths across the world using social media and using other methods like the ones that we've seen from Peru, using songs to protect their territories. I hope that at some point we can pick that up as young Indigenous communities in Kenya, because social media is a really heated platform in the country, and I cannot imagine the backlash that will come with that. If the Indigenous communities just went straight ahead to use such as a method here in Kenya, at least not now, or even if it's now, there should be really well thought through steps to take for that to happen. But yeah, what I'm glad for is that there are youths that have picked this up and in their different ways, helping the women, helping the elderlies, and now we have a couple of them willing to take up the role of doing interpretation or even writing down the Indigenous knowledge in preparation of the Indigenous-led education programs that we really look forward to having in the coming future. Yeah, thank you so much. That's all I would say for now.
Thank you so much, Milka. Thanks to share with us all these stories and brings to light also this conservation model based on fortress conservation model, no? As you based on exclusion, as you said, no? And highlight how conservation model is also like evicting the Indigenous communities. And thank you so much for sharing your challenges, your frustration, and also highlight how with modernity, it's also very difficult, like with this dream of modernity, it's also very difficult sometimes to bring youth on board, So we appreciate your challenge and very good luck. And now from Africa, we go back to Latin America and to hear the story of Lucas Quintapuray, who is currently the Longo of the Mapuche community in Argentina. Longo is the leader of the Mapuche Quintapuray. The Mapuche Quintapuray community inhabits the lands around the Correntos Lake, which is a territorial space that has been inhabited by the community for over 150 years. Luca is also a representative of the Zonal Defense Council of the Mapuche Confederation of Neuquén. and they are also a member of the Icca Consortium. Luca himself is a member of the consortium and currently is the co-chair of this consortium youth group. And his role as a longo in his community has led him, together with his elder, to denounce the abuse of a state institution and act in defense of their territory. Moreover, Luca has also been deeply involved in a cultural struggle to revive the Mapudungun language and culture, working both with youth and elders in this process. Luca in Latin America is also representing the consortium in different international meetings, such as the Congress of Protected Area of Latin America of the IUCN, and he is also a member of the Indigenous Provincial Council. So through this position, he was appointed and recognized by the community to speak before the Argentina National Park Organization and advocate for the indigenous rights. Hola, Lucas. Aquí vamos a hablar contigo. Welcome. Lucas, ¿estás?
Mari kompu penyi kompulamien kumaita fachantumu pero mangle akuita kumetra un fachantumu akuita ne wentule impu weche walmapu mulepalu. Bueno, los saludaba en mi idioma a todos, muy contento de ver tantos jóvenes líderes y conscientes del mundo. Creo que la lucha colectiva es algo muy importante para nuestros pueblos y para el medio ambiente. Y recalcar que los pueblos originarios hemos sido los defensores milenarios de los territorios. Gracias, Eleonora, por la presentación. Y creo muy importante por ahí empezar un poco con la historia de nuestro pueblo, que tiene casi 12.000 años de preexistencia en lo que hoy es la Patagonia argentina y la Patagonia chilena. Y nuestro pueblo ha sido siempre un pueblo guerrero que ha defendido al punto que la corona española declaró a nuestro pueblo como un imperio, como una nación mapuche, porque no pudieron dominarnos, no pudieron doblegar a nuestro pueblo. Cuando siguió pasando el tiempo, colonizadores siguieron intentando reducir a nuestro pueblo y finalmente lo lograron con un genocidio en 1900, que sufrimos una gran masacre como pueblo. Entonces, ese pueblo, que una vez fue un imperio, que una vez tuvo grandes líderes como Calfucurá, fue doblegado y fueron humillados, despojados de los territorios y esclavizados. A partir de ese momento nuestro pueblo hizo un ocultamiento como una forma de autodefenderse, de autoproteger a los suyos, y quedaron muy pocos territorios a manos de nuestro pueblo. Nuestra comunidad ha sido una de esas comunidades que ha podido resistir en territorio y no hemos perdido el origen y la descendencia. Nosotros cuando nos referimos al territorio decimos que tenemos un tugún y tenemos un cupalme, tenemos una historia. Y cuando nosotros entendemos de dónde venimos, es que sabemos hacia dónde tenemos que ir. Después de esta triste historia como pueblo, con el transcurso del tiempo, los mayores que quedaron dejaron migajas en el camino que claramente nos demostraban que éramos parte de un pueblo ancestral, con costumbres propias, con un idioma propio y una cosmovisión propia también, que nada tiene que ver con el colonialismo, ¿no? Y a partir de ese momento nosotros, como jóvenes y con la ayuda de nuestros mayores, entendimos que nacimos colonizados, crecimos colonizados, pero que vamos a hacer todo el esfuerzo posible para no morir colonizados, poder recuperar este conocimiento tan natural, tan arraigado al territorio. Cuando uno entiende eso como joven, es que puede mirar y entender del por qué defiende el territorio. Nuestro pueblo mapuche habla completamente de la tierra. Mapuche literalmente significa gente de la tierra. Nuestro idioma se llama Mapudungún, que es la lengua de la tierra. Nuestros apellidos tienen que ver con animales, tienen que ver con la historia de cada familia. Mi apellido Quintupray significa buscando las flores. Hay apellidos que tienen que ver con animales, con lugares, con energías. Y cuando uno se da cuenta de eso, se da cuenta de que pertenece a la tierra. No somos dueños de los territorios y no lo defendemos porque es nuestra propiedad. Lo defendemos porque ahí están nuestros ancestros, ahí está nuestra historia. Y el paso más importante que hizo nuestro pueblo y que nos ayudó a nosotros, a los jóvenes, a autorreconocernos, fue nuestra bandera mapuche que tengo en mi espalda. Y cuando se crea la Buenufoye, nuestra bandera, ahí entendimos que nosotros nacimos en Argentina, somos ciudadanos argentinos, pero nuestra nacionalidad es la nacionalidad mapuche, porque una nación tiene una lengua propia, costumbres propias, y que nuestras costumbres no son las costumbres argentinas, más allá de que respetamos, pero tenemos una propia manera de ver el mundo. Y la bandera mapuche nos ayuda a eso. Si se fijan en los colores, está el azul, que representa la pureza, a las aguas, al Huenumapu, al espacio de arriba. El verde representa toda la biodiversidad del territorio. Y el rojo representa el genocidio que sufrió nuestro pueblo y es para que nunca nos olvidemos. Y esa bandera siempre la levantamos cada vez que vamos a protestas, cada vez que queremos defender nuestro derecho, porque es nuestro símbolo. Entonces ya nos separamos de alguna manera del Estado y decimos, nosotros somos pueblos preexistentes. Y hoy esta bandera se levanta tanto en Chile como en Argentina y decimos, somos parte de un pueblo propio. El círculo del centro representa al sol, representa la circularidad del mundo, representa las energías que hay en el espacio de arriba. Y cuando nosotros decimos circularidad, reciprocidad, es que entendemos que cada cosa que hacemos en los territorios tenemos que ser recíprocos, tenemos que mantener un equilibrio. Y hoy nosotros los jóvenes que hemos recibido este conocimiento y estamos haciendo todo el esfuerzo para seguir recuperando todo lo que somos como pueblo, es que ahí entendemos el por qué tenemos que defender el territorio. Porque si nosotros perdemos esa visión y esa conciencia de saber que somos parte de la tierra, si la perdemos, entonces no tenemos la energía y la fuerza para defender el territorio. Cada vez que nos levantamos, entendemos que tenemos que hacer una ceremonia. Cada vez que caminamos en el territorio, sabemos que tenemos que pedir permiso. Cada vez que llega el solsticio de invierno, sabemos que es un cambio de la naturaleza. Entonces nosotros sufrimos un cambio. Por eso creo que la parte más importante y la que hemos trabajado como jóvenes mapuches es recuperar lo que somos. Porque se ha metido en nuestros territorios otro tipo de creencias que nada tiene que ver con lo ancestral, que es la iglesia, que es el catolicismo, y esa es la peor enfermedad. Uno piensa que hay muchas amenazas que tienen que ver con la especulación inmobiliaria, con el poder, con el petróleo, pero si perdemos la cosmovisión y se nos meten creencias que no son propias, se nos desvía el foco de defender el territorio. La iglesia hasta el día de hoy sigue diciendo que el pueblo mapuche invoca a Satanás en sus ceremonias, que invocamos a energías malas, cuando en realidad es todo lo contrario. Nosotros cuando hacemos ceremonia, llamamos a las energías del territorio para que formen parte y nos acompañen en cada proceso que hacemos. Y eso yo lo aprendí de joven. Mis padres no me lo inculcaron tanto, pero hoy nosotros fortalecidos se los inculcamos a nuestros hijos, a nuestros sobrinos, a nuestros primos, para que venga una generación consciente de quiénes somos. Y ellos hoy están orgullosos de decir que son mapuches. No como nuestros abuelos, que han sido perseguidos, han sido discriminados, y como contaba Icca, la hermana, han sido invisibilizados por la sociedad. Pero nuestra lucha ha llevado a que hoy la sociedad entienda la defensa que queremos hacer, y que no es solamente un bien para nosotros, es un bien para la sociedad, es un bien para las generaciones, y generar la empatía en la gente que no es indígena es lo que nos ayuda también, porque nosotros sabemos muy bien a dónde vamos, pero tenemos que hacer entender a la gente lo que realmente importa en la vida, que son los territorios de vida, porque es el sustento. Y hemos tenido con el paso del tiempo muchos avances en las escuelas. También trabajamos en las escuelas de la ciudad para generar conciencia, para que sepan que la bandera no representa anarquismo, terrorismo, todo lo contrario. Queremos generar interculturalidad. No podemos volver al tiempo atrás y decir, devuélvanos nuestro territorio. Queremos decir, queremos mantener los territorios que aún nos quedan, y queremos que ustedes entiendan el por qué lo defendemos. Entonces hoy, cada vez que hacemos ceremonias mapuches, invitamos a nuestros compañeros no mapuches, invitamos a la sociedad para que comprenda lo que somos, y para que nuestros niños y niñas, cuando crezcan, cuando vayan a la escuela, cuando vayan a la ciudad, no sufran esa discriminación. Y creo que lo más importante y el legado que nos dejó una autoridad en la época del genocidio fue una frase muy importante. Esa autoridad era un lonco, un líder mapuche, allá por 1900, que se llamaba Calfucurá. Calfucurá, cuando lo derrotaron y lo llevaron como esclavo al Museo de Buenos Aires, de La Plata, antes de morirse, dijo: en los hijos de mis hijos me levantaré. Y eso somos nosotros. Y nos estamos levantando y nos estamos empoderando, porque sabemos que a partir de esa frase tan importante del lonco, sabemos que tenemos pilares fundamentales que nos sostienen, que es la preexistencia, el autorreconocimiento, el territorio, la libre determinación. Cuando entendemos eso, entendemos lo que verdaderamente importa. Y no sé cuánto tiempo me queda, pero comentarles como para finalizar, que también es muy complicado, porque nosotros como jóvenes estamos recuperando lo que somos como pueblo, y paralelamente estamos defendiendo el territorio. Y es una doble tarea sumamente complicada, es una mochila muy pesada la que llevamos. Mañana, viernes 9 de abril, hay una orden de desalojo en una de nuestras comunidades, que se llama Paichilantriao, por una jueza que es sumamente discriminatoria, racista, y que quieren desalojar a una familia que ha estado desde toda la historia en ese territorio. Y la quieren desalojar porque está en uno de los lagos más importantes, en uno de los paisajes turísticos más codiciados por todos. Y eso va a ser mañana. Mañana se cumple el plazo, así que mañana vamos a estar acampando en ese lugar para seguir diciendo que nosotros no generamos violencia, que nosotros defendemos el territorio. A pesar de que acá llegó el invierno y ya los días están fríos, vamos a estar resistiendo, esperando que no haya violencia de parte de las fuerzas estatales. Y también es muy complicado porque la ex ministra de Justicia llegó a estos lugares a fomentar que los mapuches somos terroristas, usurpamos tierras, ¿no? Y escucharla de una funcionaria que diga que somos terroristas es doblemente trágico, porque genera odio racial. Pero mañana le vamos a demostrar que nosotros no somos violentos. Los violentos son ellos y nosotros somos defensores naturales de los territorios. Así que mañana con toda la fuerza de nuestro Futake Cheyem, nuestros ancestros, vamos a estar resistiendo en ese lugar. Y espero que cada uno de los jóvenes que hoy está en este panel, estoy seguro que hacen también la defensa de los territorios, que aportan cada grano de arena en cada lugar del mundo para generar conciencia, porque eso es lo que tenemos que seguir replicando, que somos defensores por naturaleza. Así que les agradezco mucho, espero no haber sido muy extenso en mi palabra y espero que nos sigamos fortaleciendo y transmitiendo esto tan importante que es defender los territorios de vida con una conciencia ancestral. Así que muchas gracias a todos.
Thank you very much, Lucas, for sharing your story. It's a very important one. Indigenous peoples all over the world do share this experience of colonization and oppression that continues up to now. But also we really share a story of resistance against this oppression, of being connected to our lands, of being connected to our ancestors, and our way of seeing the world, of this deep reciprocity that you mentioned to the earth is really something that others can learn from. And yes, it is really about strengthening ourselves as people. So I think that's a really great jump off point as we move now to our third youth speaker today. Today we're now moving to Asia, where we have Alma Sinumlag. Alma is a cultural activist and indigenous peoples human rights defender from the Butbut tribe in Kalinga in the Cordillera, Philippines. For 14 years now, she has been with the organization Dapayan Ti Kultura Iti Cordillera, or DKK, which is an alliance of cultural organizations and individuals committed to advancing the rights and welfare of artists and cultural workers in the Cordillera. She has been a reporter for Nordis, which is a publication, and she is also currently the communications and networking officer of the Philippine Task Force for Indigenous Peoples' Rights. I very much admire her and others at DKK for their amazing work as artists and performers and activists, and I look forward to hearing what she has to say. And so without delaying any further, I pass the space to Alma as she shares now how they have used culture and the arts as a tool in defending their territories of life. Alma?
Thank you, Sefa. I'll just share some photos while talking. And I
Okay.
also admire what
Required-
Lucas said a while ago, that we indigenous peoples are defenders in nature. Okay. So I'd like to start with an age-old adage that says, land is life. Our mountains are connected with the rivers, with our rice fields, and the community. Our land is the source of our intergenerational livelihood, our survival, and the source of our collective life. Our belief systems, our social values, our indigenous songs, our chants, our dances, our stories, our history as a people, the governance and management practices are all deeply rooted to our ancestral lands. This is why indigenous communities, especially the youth, are taught the duty to protect and nurture our ancestral lands. Through generations since the colonization period, development aggression is one of the main problems that our communities are facing. The government and the corporations are imposing projects in our territories which are detrimental to our survival as a people. Some of these projects are large-scale mining, energy projects such as dams, massive logging. In the point of view of the government and business, we indigenous peoples can be sacrificed to pave way for national development. They undermine our rights to ancestral land and self-determination. As cultural workers, we also have the duty to contribute to safeguarding our ancestral lands and advancing our right to self-determination. In the Cordillera, songs, chants, dances, and other art expressions are integral part of the life of the community. These are observed in the life cycle of a person from womb to tomb or from birth to death. These are also observed in the agricultural cycle, in the festivities, and in other community occasions. These art expressions also evolved through time and based on the situation of our people. Traditional chants, for example, have been transformed into protest chants during the historic anti-Chico River Dam struggle here in the Cordillera. The women who cannot speak in public resort to using songs, chants, and other art expressions or cultural expressions to express their dissent against mines, dams, and militarization. They even bared their breasts to shame the military who are forcing entry into our ancestral territories. The Payan Cultura de Cordillera, or People's Center for Cordillera Culture, was born out of the success stories of using art expressions as a tool for defense. The center's objectives are to provide a venue for interaction and exchange of support among indigenous youth, artists, cultural workers in the region, and develop various arts and cultural expressions as tools for conscientization and campaign in the Cordillera people's struggle for land and for self-determination. In the midst of the voluminous bodies of knowledge and concepts of ancestral lands and self-determination, our role as cultural workers is to transform them into art expressions, cultural expressions, understandable by our communities and the wider public. The contents of arts that we are developing and popularizing are derived from people's stories, our history, our oral history, our dances and music, issues and aspirations of our people. They were also derived from values and communal ethos of the people, from our traditional knowledge, and the conscious transfer of this knowledge and skills to the next generation. We also adhere to the teaching of a German anti-fascist poet and playwright who said, art is not a mirror held up to reality, but a hammer in which to shape it. On this note, we do not just mirror the reality of our communities, we also have the role to educate and mobilize the people to challenge the oppressive structures. The art forms that we use are largely based from our rich culture in the region. We also adapted and continue to be open to other appropriate forms appreciated by our target audience. DKK, the Dapayan Kultura Iti Cordillera, have also produced several music albums, which are largely inspired by our traditional songs and chants accompanied by our traditional instruments. We also have innovated. We also did some innovations by blending our traditional music with Western musical instruments to we also mounted several theatrical pieces through the years, mostly depicted the realities of mining, dams, militarization, political vilification, and other issues which are faced by our communities here in the region. We have performed in schools, in communities, in churches, in conferences, in forums, and other venues outside the region. And through the years, we continue to develop our arts. We continue to develop our art forms and the contents of our arts by community integration, by youth and elders exchange or dialogues, by cultural exchanges with other communities, other indigenous groups in the region and outside the region, by the transfer of skills from our elders to the youth, and through educations and other activities. We cultural activists will continue to develop art expressions, train younger cultural workers and artists until such time that we can only paint, dance, and sing culture of freedom. And before ending my presentation, I would like to continue the slides. These are examples of the performances that the DKK have mounted through the years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alma. That was a really, really great story, and thank you for sharing the work that you do. I think song dance theater has been a very key way that stories here in the Cordillera have been passed down from generation to generation, and it's been a great source of pride and solidarity among communities here against oppression. Now, I'm really excited to share this next video, which brings to life a bit of what Alma has been talking about in her sharing. So the song that we will be playing to you is called Kulilipan, which is a story of how the Igorot people or Kaigorotan had resisted oppression from those who had tried to take their lands and resources. It's a music video that also features the performances of DKK and gives a look into the rich culture and arts here in the Cordillera and how it's used to build community solidarity. So, Diana, if you could play our video.
tayo. Inuki ko ti bantay para ti payaw kan balay. Kas bilit ti tangatang angin ti kaay-ayam alis tunga balabalasiw tiwaig ken karayan. Wayawayaan aganup ti kabakiran agpatung kenag tungali manag ay ken managni. Kulip si kulilipan, kulip si kulipanan, kulip si kulilipan, kulip si kulipanan. Naawis dat balito ko di agsisin naruno kan ganaet adat plano agawan tibak nang ko. Ngamsyak ni kaigurutan anak di man nakigubat tawid ko kahalasag kan gayang turad kan sirip alimaban. Di pa kaistoryaan puli kaigurutan awanan sarday sa lakniban dagaan na agtaudan. Nabakad kas kabanbantayan nabilag kas rayos karayan nabarating nulungan tignay kaigurutan. Kulip si kulilipan, kulip si kulipanan, kulip si kulilipan, kulip si kulipanan.
Thank you for this video. I think this video really closed very well the session from the youth to the elders and connected to the words that already our speaker shared with us. The relationship between youth and elders is really the key in the struggle to defend our territory of life. In fact, this video speaks about the importance of our rich heritage and how this rich heritage define our identity and how our ancestor legacy of resistance against oppression is part of our tradition. When I say this also, I I feel, and I speak about myself, that coming also from an island which have been always at the mercy of the powerful, and how our song of and our stories tell continuously a story of struggle. So how culture, how Halma was saying before as well, is very important to also understand our identity. So we know that in communities and movements, stories and lessons are passed down from generation to generation. It is intergenerational transmission of value, culture, and language, and the celebration of all these distinctive contribution of elders and youth is therefore the key to the resilience of indigenous people in community and for the struggle for our territories of life. Therefore, we are really glad to also have in this youth session a part where we also invite a representative from the elders community to share reflections and lessons they have gained over the years. So we are really very much forward to listening and learn from them. And then if it's possible also, we would really like to have a dialogue between the youth and the representative of the elders. And we very much look forward also for your comments. So I leave the word to Sefa.
Yes, I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker. So we have here Jill Carino, who has been in the Indigenous peoples movement since she was young and has seen how the movement has changed through the years. Jill Carino is an Indigenous Ibaloy from Baguio City, Philippines, who has been working in Indigenous peoples issues for more than 40 years. She has worked in various non-government organizations doing research, organizing education, campaigns, and advocacy. She is currently the executive director of the Philippine Task Force for Indigenous Peoples' Rights, or TFIP, which is a network of NGOs doing development work in Indigenous communities around the country. She is also vice chairperson for the external affairs of the Cordillera Peoples Alliance, which is a federation of grassroots Indigenous peoples organizations in the Cordillera region. She's also she happens to be my mother, so I'm really glad that she's joining us today. So actually, I prepared a question that I really wanted to ask her, which is, what have been the key ingredients the key ingredients to sustaining Indigenous peoples movements from your experience. So, Mama, take it away.
Okay, thank you. And it was really inspiring also to listen to the young people talking earlier. So what are the key ingredients needed in sustaining the Indigenous peoples movement? Maybe I can talk from our experience. So let me start by relating a short anecdote from the Indigenous peoples movement in Itogon, Benguet in the Cordillera, Philippines, that I was involved in during the 1980s and 90s. Here, the Ibaloy and Kankanay indigenous communities were engaged in an intense struggle to defend their land and resources from the destructive impacts of open-pit gold mining. The people were traditional small-scale miners and farmers whose livelihoods and food sources were at risk, whose communities were facing displacement, whose water sources and forest resources were drying up, and who were encountering internal social discord because of the large-scale corporate mining operations. So what did the people do? They organized themselves into community organizations, small-scale miners associations, women's associations, youth groups, small-scale and even cultural groups and even children's groups under a municipal-wide inter-community alliance. So by working together, the people successfully stopped the expansion of the open pit mines, which is why their communities still exist until today. Remarkable to note was the formation of the anti-open pit mining kids. So this is a children's cultural group made up of children aged 6 to 12 who performed songs, dances, and skits during protest actions in the communities like barricades, rallies, and pickets. The anti-open pit mining kids are now all grown up, many of them with kids themselves. And many of them are now leaders of the continuing indigenous peoples movement in the Cordillera to defend land, life, and resources. And the song you heard earlier was sung by Maurice, one of the anti-open pit mining kids in the 1980s. So what lessons can we draw from this experience in Itogon, as well as from many other community struggles around the world that make up what we now know as the indigenous peoples movement? And what are the key ingredients that need to be there to sustain this movement and to keep the land, territories, and environment safe for the sake of future generations? So I think the first ingredient is wisdom, or sirib as we say here. We need to learn from the wisdom of our forebears and elders who defended the land from invaders and colonizers, and who ensured the patrimony and heritage of future generations of indigenous peoples. The indigenous knowledge and values they developed through time in close interaction with nature and the environment continue to guide us as present-day indigenous activists towards achieving our aspirations of living in harmony with nature. Living the values they taught us, such as volunteerism, cooperation, care for the environment, community solidarity, among other positive cultural values, will lead us on the right path to self-determination. A second key ingredient is courage, or turud as we say here. It is a reality that we face many challenges and obstacles along the way. Many of our frontliners in the people's movement have died, have been killed, while many are now under attack. We need to build up our courage to defend the land from destruction, stop the displacement of our communities, and protect the environment in the face of numerous challenges. And all around the world, indigenous communities are confronted with human rights violations, criminalization, and weaponization of the law against those who are merely fighting to defend their rights. There have been cases of killings of prominent anti-dam activists, for instance, like Berta Cáceres of Honduras and forest rights defenders like Billy of Thailand. Here in the Cordillera, we have our own indigenous martyr and hero, whose name is Maclean Dulag. He was killed by the military for leading the resistance against the Chico River dams during the 1970s. And his words live on until today when he said, "What is the most precious thing to man? Life. If life is threatened, what ought a man do? Fight. This he must do, otherwise he is dishonored, and that is worse than death. If we fight, we die honorably." So Berta, Billy, Macleing, and many other indigenous heroes, martyrs, and leaders around the world inspire us to keep on fighting, to build up the courage to defend our territories. The third ingredient is energy, gagut, and creativity. These characteristics are especially strong among the youth, and these are very much needed as we grow old in the struggle. We need younger, brighter, and fresher heads to take on the leadership roles in the people's movement. We need the energy, enthusiasm, and creativity of the youth to keep the movement alive under new, changing, and challenging conditions. Just as the anti-open pit mining kids took on the challenge to carry on the torch for the indigenous people's movement in Itogon, it is necessary to mobilize the youth in order to ensure the continuity of the struggle. This is where the intergenerational nature of the people's movement comes into play. And intergenerational learning and transmission of knowledge from our forebears to our elders, to us, the present generation, and to the younger and future generations are key to finding success. The fourth ingredient is passion, or we can say nakum in our language. Passion, will, and commitment are necessary to see the struggle through to the end. Many of our struggles to defend our land and environment are long term and long running. Some have been going on for decades, which is why we need a continuous turnover, training, and capacity building of young, committed, and passionate leaders. They are badly needed to do various tasks like organizing, education, and awareness raising, communications, resource mobilization, campaigns and advocacy, and many more. We need new blood, for second and third liners to keep the struggle going. The fifth ingredient is unity and solidarity, panagkay-kaysa. It is necessary to build the broadest possible solidarity and form a network of support for the people's movement. Indigenous peoples, as a marginalized sector, need all the support we can get locally, nationally, and internationally from fellow indigenous as well as non-indigenous peoples, environmental defenders, from our advocates, educators, media, artists, champions in government, intergovernmental bodies, and many more. Our solidarity partners have stood by us during hard times and will continue to do so in the future. For instance, here in the Cordillera, many foreign friends from different countries have visited us to learn from our communities and their struggles. And they went back home inspired to write research papers, news articles, and to tell our stories. They produced videos, formed support groups, and solicited material and financial support for the Cordillera people struggle. All these various forms of international solidarity and support have been very helpful in sustaining our activities and campaigns. So, in short, the key ingredients needed in sustaining the people's movement are one, indigenous wisdom, courage, energy, creativity, passion, commitment, and solidarity. All these brought together in an intergenerational continuum or linkage makes for a lasting, living, and driven people's movement to defend land, life, and the environment. So, to end this short sharing on a lighter note, at the risk of making Josefa cringe in embarrassment, joke. Let me say that all this talk of of ingredients and linkages makes me want to cook a big pot of soup of using our indigenous ingredients. Start with a link of traditional sausages known as pinunuk or smoked pork called utag here in the Cordillera. Throw in a good helping of beans and vegetables gathered from the garden, and you have a healthy, hearty soup that is delicious, nutritious, warm to the stomach, good for the brains, and food for the soul. I just hope I could serve this soup to all of you here today. But anyway, we are not able to do that. So I end here. Thank you for inviting me to this forum, and I wish we have more learning in store for us. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. I haven't heard this before, just so you know. So I also learned a lot from this. And just so you know, my mom cooks very good food. So I'm also, I get to eat the soup that she's describing. So yes, I think we all learned a lot from those lessons, no matter where we are in the world. And I think we as youth have so much to learn from our elders who have been through so many challenges and have overcome them somehow. And while we as young people have to go through our own challenges, and especially with new things coming up like COVID, for example, it definitely still helps to understand the ways that our elders have gotten through these different hurdles that have been big and that have pushed forward the bigger movement for indigenous people's rights and for territories of life. And yes, as my mom also mentioned, this work is long term. You need to definitely have those things that she mentioned: wisdom, courage, passion, creativity, and energy to just keep on continuing and also pass this on to the generations that come after us. So yes, thank you so much for sharing. Now we're going to move to we're going to open a space for us to exchange among the different panelists and also from the participants. If you have any questions that you would like to ask any of the panelists, please put them in the chat and we can ask our panelists and our speakers to answer them. And we can see that in the chat there are so many so many messages that are saying that all the talks have been very, very inspiring for them. So if anyone, even from the panelists, would like to ask something, please feel free to raise your hand and or just unmute yourself. And or if anyone just wants to share, doesn't have to be a question, then please feel free to raise your hand also and unmute yourselves. Oh, let's give it a moment. Okay, I see a hand raised from Victor. Go ahead, Victor.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. The network seems fluctuating. Yes, I'm Victor James. Of course, I'm rapporteur, but I had one of the lady who said something from Kenya in regards to safety of activists and activism. Yes, her name was Micah. That was right, Micah, isn't she? Yes. I raised it yesterday that all the activists, both the ones fighting for indigenous rights and climate change, environmentalists, and nature conservation. Because I came from my origin, I'm based in UK, but my origin is Niger Delta, Nigeria. As you do know, the Nigerian government have been very, very rough and have a abysmal record when it comes to human rights record with our indigenous people in Niger Delta. I come from Niger Delta, where the oil production, which seems to be the major strength of Nigerian economy, come from. But the oil companies like Shell, Chevron, ExxonMobil, they have violated environmental laws. They are responsible to the low life expectancy in Niger Delta. So when you go there, you will see that the pollution there is unaccounted and also is very despicable by oil companies. They collaborate with federal government to pollute the region there. So when you go there, you see the ecosystem is completely dead. The fish is dead. The sea is polluted. In fact, the worst of it is the gas flaring, which is highly hazardous. When you pollute, you know, the people who die there don't even know because there's low educational side of it, where most indigenous people don't know when they are dying, that they are dying from black soot, they are dying from gas flaring, they are dying from pollution, from oil mining and activity. So, but our life are at risk, the activists. every activist in most part of the world, both UK here, both in Nigeria, they get shot by state actors. They get shot by security personnel. They get shot by military personnel. So I'm appealing to UN and other international actors to grant some sort of security clearance to all activists. This is for the safety net of activists. It's very, very, very important. We shouldn't make the same mistake that the older generation made under the course of fighting for human rights, fighting for environmentalists. So we need that kind of protection that will make activists untouchable. That is what I'm appealing for all young activists, so that once they are protesting, the international community will give them some sort of a badge or a immunity or diplomatic pass that will enable them to continue what they do for humanity, and the state actor will not touch them because they are recognized by UN. I don't know if you get my strategy. Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, so these are things I started activism at the age of 16. This is my 15 years experience, I'm telling you now. I have been detained severally in Nigeria, but my uncles who work in government, they bailed me out immediately. But those activists that don't have connection like me, they tend to suffer. And when they finally get released, they deter others from coming out to speak out, because they will share their story, which is a bitter story from human rights perspective. Their rights have been violated by police, or just for them speaking out for environmental actions. So we need protection for activists. I'm appealing for anyone who can make this happen, please.
Yeah, thank you, Victor, very much for sharing this. Indeed, it's a very important thing, because yes, like this is the challenge of all the human rights defenders that are there struggling for their rights in their territories of life. So I don't know if some of the speaker wants to comment on this and respond to Victor, or if it was just a comment. No. Milka? Yes, and then we'll pass the word to Mark. Yeah, Milka.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Victor, for really pointing out the things that are happening with human rights defenders. I'll tell you that is what is happening everywhere for human rights defenders and environmental rights defenders. But unfortunately, it's harder on those human rights and environmental rights defenders who are working against corporations that are, doing business with governments, like the oil extraction, mineral extractions, and is a little less with those governments that are protecting to be, creating more protected areas. It is the reality, and to some extent, I think like total, I can't figure out a way in which they can be, given total immunity to these kind of threats, because still human rights defenders and environmental rights defenders will still have to be in touch with their people to be able to work. But there are organizations out here that help kind of provide grants for temporary relocation when the threat is so high, train people on their security, online security of their phones being tracked, and all those. And yeah, I think my new role at the ICCA Consortium, sorry, before I didn't mention that I got my approval as an honorary member to the ICCA Consortium yesterday, which I'm happy to be taking up. And I will be coordinating the Defending Territories stream. And this is one of the areas that I'll be looking at very keenly. And it will be good to get in touch with some of you who are, who are working on this and are facing threats, and we can together think of how we can help each other. But yeah, the best way we can, not that the consortium will have like all the help needed, but we can think through it together to just make sure that we remain alive, at least to fight for the rights of our communities and our environments as we go by. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. I would like to coordinate or partner with your NGO, because my NGO focus deeply on environmental conservation in Niger Delta and youth empowerment as well. You made mention of ageism, which
Thank you, Victor. Sorry to interrupt you. Maybe you can reach out with Milka later on and discuss about this. Maybe we'll give space also to some other people to ask questions. Thank you very much also for Milka to reply. And this is indeed very, very important issues. And also, like from the side of the consortium, we're always looking at the strengthening this part. And there are, also like from the UN side, there are ways they are trying to strengthen the mechanism to ensure the security of environmental defenders. But as Milka pointed out, it's not always so easy. So I would like, Mark wants to ask a question. Please carry on.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Mark Aquino. I'm from Global Youth Biodiversity Network in Southeast Asia, and I'm calling from the Philippines. Thank you, Milka, Lucas, and Alma for the presentation. So the question goes to everyone who actually presented. May I ask if, for example, if there are efforts from the tribal council or the elders, efforts there on your struggles that actually help you guys win, or anything that actually the elders help you with in some advices or actions that you are able to use so that you can actually address these issues along the way. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Would like to go first? I see maybe Lucas. Would you like?
Sí, gracias, hermano, por la pregunta. En esta dualidad que tenemos como pueblo, los mayores son el pilar fundamental justamente que nos enseñan a ver por qué camino tomar. Y los ancianos más importantes para nosotros en nuestro pueblo, seguramente en otros pueblos pasa algo similar, son los machis, que son autoridades filosóficas, que son como una especie de visionarios, ¿sí? Ellos son una especie de chamán o tienen como como algo natural de guiar a las comunidades y de curarlos. Lamentablemente en este genocidio que sufrimos como pueblo, a los primeros que empezaron a asesinar justamente fueron a los machis, pero han quedado y eso se transmite de generación en generación. Y han surgido muchas autoridades con el tiempo que han tenido esa capacidad de saber qué rol tienen que cumplir y son a los principales mayores que buscamos nosotros los jóvenes. Pero están muy lejos, pero igualmente hemos viajado y lo más importante es poder participar de ceremonias. Creo que dentro de nuestro pueblo mapuche hay muchas comunidades, en la provincia donde nosotros estamos son 64 comunidades mapuches, y prácticamente entre todas estamos en contacto y hacen diferentes ceremonias durante todo el año, y creo que la fortaleza es imitarnos mutuamente y ahí conocer otros ancianos que por ahí tienen el mismo conocimiento que los nuestros o tienen algo que los que los nuestros hayan perdido. Entonces es como juntar de cada parte un poco, pero justamente nuestro rol como jóvenes es escuchar tanto a los sabios, a los mayores, o por ahí hay muchos ancianos que claramente tienen una cabeza colonizada, pero si uno empieza a indagar, nos damos cuenta de que tienen mucho por aportar, pero ni siquiera ellos se dan cuenta de su historia, porque se acuerdan de cuando eran chicos, las costumbres que tenían y lo que hacían, pero a ellos, sus padres, no le contaban qué era. Entonces hoy nosotros agarramos todas estas herramientas y unimos un rompecabezas. Pero creo que es muy importante escuchar a los mayores y nosotros como jóvenes tenemos responsabilidad de transmitir eso a los más pequeños. Espero haya respondido tu pregunta. Gracias.
I don't know, I saw, Giovanni? See, if you want to go ahead. Thank you, Luca, for your reply.
Thank you, Eleanor, for consideration. Yeah, I'd like to share, taking off from Manang Jill's number one ingredient. That's wisdom. Later on, the itag, because we can have the itag later on. One of the ways by which elders can transmit that wisdom to the youth is to transfer, or is to translate that indigenous knowledge systems into its physical dimension in the form of a map, so that the knowledge of the elders about the territory, their understanding about their uses, historical, present, and future, will be put in a map, constructed in a map, so that the ideas of the elders are seen and read in the map. This can be transmitted to the incoming youth leaders. Many of our IP leaders are already getting old, and they're getting sick. They do not have social security. They do not have health benefits, and they all rely or depend on the nature around them. So what we are now doing as a sort of transmittal of knowledge for the youth is to build, to construct these territories, these maps, and have them as proof of traditional land ownership and management systems. And in our case, as a layer of protection, we submit them to the United Nations Environmental Program. And just to elucidate that an international body is looking at a portion of territories of indigenous peoples, in the same manner as maybe the Kulilipan group, Almas group, the DKK, may also transmit these collections of oral songs and oral stories and songs and dancing on a UN, maybe on a UN body that is engaged in education, and like UNESCO. What I'm trying to say here is that there is this layer and layer and layer of support and layer of protection on indigenous people's rights, given that the only remaining resources we have now in this planet are mostly those territories managed by indigenous peoples. And in the context of development aggression, suddenly we are criminals. Suddenly we have no rights. Suddenly we are called terrorists. And suddenly our tenurial rights are of no existence. So that's one key that I'd like the youth to maybe take stock on. Maybe in some future time conduct training on mapping among the youth to translate the indigenous knowledge into its physical dimension in the form of maps.
Okay, thank you very much, Giovanni, to highlight this this map transfer of knowledge. That's very interesting. And so we have maybe time for one or two questions if there is somebody else. I saw that there was some hand raised before, but I don't see any more.
Marcos, would you like to speak?
Hi, everyone. Hi, my name is Marcus. I'm a National Geographic Young Explorer, just like Sefa as well. I'm currently working in a participatory photography project with indigenous community in Bolivia. My question is really to looking at the role of photography and creative work into understanding the role of territory in indigenous people's identity and a way of reconnection with their land and their past, in which young people who are involved in creative photography, creative storytelling, can re-enter or reconnect with this, with their history and with their knowledges. And in this way, kind of like entering this intergenerational knowledge that we are talking about, and how we can facilitate as people, as photographers, this kind of like connections. I myself, I am a photographer, and I've been in kind of like participatory photography before, but this is the first time that I do it kind of with indigenous peoples, and I would like to kind of like accurately facilitate this connection with elders and with people within the communities. So any advice would be amazing from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcos. Someone wants to respond on this?
Well, that can complement mapping, because if you document women and youth constructing, for example, the 3D model, where they are interpreting the views and traditional knowledge of elders, you can take that as a document and make it as part of the continuum process.
Yes, thank you, Giovanni, for, do you want to say
I think
else?
mapping can be really powerful, and I think like constructing maps and with images, I think can be really, really incredible, especially if you're trying to reconnect with territory, and if you are able to, I guess, document the things that are happening around the communities and kind of like map them together with the youth. I think that would be really, really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I also think that photography and different way of documenting today this territory of life and culture of indigenous communities is very different, because we also live in this social world where it's very different from the past. So using like maps and videos and images are also like an easier way to connect also with our audience. So yes, I think this is a very nice project, Marcus. And if there is nobody else,
there is one more.
Yeah.
And then maybe this is the last one before we close. I'll call on Carla. Oh, sorry, Mika. Milka, would you like to speak relating to the previous question before we call on Carla then?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so my response to Marcus is, of course, that he's doing a very great part of what it takes to do indigenous or environmental human rights defenders work, and a way to the realization of, you know, the territorial rights or land tenure rights of communities and indigenous communities, to be specific. Because what has been used against communities and has really worked against the efforts of communities to realize their rights is maps that have been produced solely by governments, and most of others that were developed by colonial governments. And having young people coming up and wanting to develop maps for communities that will be community initiated and oriented is such a powerful tool for communities. Currently in Kenya, communities are submitting historical land injustices claims to the National Land Commission in Kenya. And what communities are using to prove their existence in these territories over time and proving their claims is such kind of maps. So you're really doing great work, because the products of what you do now will be what will be used next year or the years after to show that communities actually existed in these areas, and they very well have their territories and boundaries documented on a map. Yeah. So thank you for that, Marcus, and keep going.
Thank you so much, Milka. And then we call on Carla to share something. Go ahead, Carla.
Yes. Yeah. Hi. Can you hear me? So I am working. I am from Mexico, but I am currently doing my PhD research in the UK, and I am working with indigenous small-scale farmers in Mexico and Belize. And we just recently create a material, which is this one. This one. It's a calendar that we created together with the farmers who they themselves took the pictures about their food system, and we translated in Maya because this is with Mayan communities. And my research is actually documenting how can we use traditional knowledge to develop like materials in terms of like food systems and climate change adaptation of these food systems. So this was really interesting because what we did this, of course, was brainstorming, and this is something that was developed between youth from the communities. The authors are youth, and the community possess the rights for this calendar. So the idea was like to collect that knowledge and put it in their own words, in their own pictures, their own images, and we're just like looking for you know, feedback and ideas from the community so that they can elaborate their own materials too, and we just like support them. So here my question was with all of you that are working in defending your territories, how can us that we're trying to support this work can do, you know, and to support the efforts? I mean, I did this calendar together with like, or we co-create this calendar, but we want to learn like from your own experience. I think Lucas mentioned it really good earlier about how us that we are not in the territories, how can we support that work? And I would just like, you know, to get some feedback and like you know, ideas or just messages from you in terms of like how can we continue doing this in a way that we are really going in the right way, you know, and just like learning from you, of course, so that we collectively can keep defending and, you know, helping you to achieve this goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Carla, for that question. Can we have some answers from our panelists? Short ones on their advice for supporters of indigenous peoples communities.
Bueno, sí, creo que por ahí el apoyo a las comunidades es muy importante, y hay un dicho que dice: dime con quién te juntas y te diré quién eres. Y nosotros hemos conocido al consorcio Icca como comunidades, y es muy importante justamente buscar estos espacios donde entre todos tenemos una conciencia en común de poder defender el territorio, ¿no? Nosotros hemos crecido como zonal, como comunidad, como zonal lafkenche, que es una zonal que representa a 3 comunidades, y esas 3 comunidades se enlazan con otras comunidades mapuches y con mapuches del otro lado de la cordillera de Chile, y a su vez conocimos al consorcio Icca. Creo que a su vez esta cadena llevó a que como jóvenes nos conozcamos, que intercambiemos experiencias. Bien lo mostraba la hermana del trabajo de fotografía, Marcus también expresaba que es muy bueno el documentar, el fotografiar, porque tiene que haber un registro de todas partes, de los pueblos, en diferentes países, y creo que es compartir más que nada, ¿no? Creo que la distancia por ahí no nos ayuda a ayudarnos en el lugar, pero sí creo que la experiencia e intercambiar las cosas que hicimos bien y también las cosas que hicimos mal, porque las comunidades cometemos errores, y entonces es bueno poder charlar en ese sentido para poder aplicarlas en territorio, y creo que lo más importante es concientizar. Creo que todos tenemos amigos, vecinos, hermanos, hermanas, que por ahí apoyan la lucha o por ahí no. Entonces creo que el fuerte está en poder transmitir la palabra. Yo estoy muy contento por lo que escuché hoy, tanto de Mika como del resto de los exponentes, porque yo me llevo mucho de sus experiencias y me lo llevo a territorio. Y es bueno estar conectado, más allá de que por ahí uno estando en comunidades está alejado de la tecnología y no entendemos de muchas cosas, pero creo que el contacto y las experiencias es lo más importante, el fotografiar, documentar. Pero creo que estamos haciendo una red de conciencia también, ¿no? Así que creo que de esa manera nos podemos apoyar entre todos. Gracias, eso.
Muchas gracias, Lucas.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for that very, very rich discussion. And I think with that, we're going to, close. I think this was a very, very rich session, bringing up very many legitimate challenges that we face as Indigenous peoples and as Indigenous youth, like assimilation, like being turned away and discriminated against because we're somehow at the same time not Indigenous enough, but at the same time too Indigenous for others. We face continued threats from those who try to take our lands. We face difficulties also with having to move away from our ancestral lands. But I think this session also taught me that we have ways to continue and to sustain through the many ways that our speakers kindly shared, through the arts, through education, through learning from our elders, through resisting and activism, and through innovation as well, like as Indigenous youth. I hope we can all take something away from all these stories, and whether or not we are Indigenous. I think many of us here do work with Indigenous peoples, even if we are not Indigenous. And yes, with that, I would just really like to say a big thank you to all our speakers, and a big thank you as well to our interpreters who are here helping us understand each other's stories. And I give the word to Eleonora if she would like to say something, and then.
No, well, thank you very much, Stefa, for these remarkable thoughts, and thank you for the speaker. I have also learned a lot today, so I'm very happy that I'm honored that I could have been here today to moderate this session together with Stefa and hearing all your stories. And as Lucas said, we all learn from each other, and this is just a space and a network to strengthen each other's. And no matter where we live, no matter in which space we are, or also which community we belong to, but I think we are somehow connected if we are in this chat and in many others. So thank you very much for sharing, and see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Mark, for coming. Hi, Grant. Hi, Holly.
Thank you, Stefa, for moderating.
It's a good session for today.
Thank you.
Gracias, thank you. Ciao, Stefa, Leonora.
Ciao, Luca.
Yes.
Ciao.
Hasta luego.
Bye. As well.
Bye, Nika.
Thank you so much for moderating. LA Stefa, you did a great job.
Thanks, Oli.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. It was well organized. Points well taken too. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Giovanni.
Okay. Sige. Thank you. Thank you. Stay safe, everyone.
You too. Thank you, Giovanni.
Okay. Gal, maybe you can. It's okay now to end the meeting.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good rest.
Bye-bye. It was really nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Speak soon. Bye.